Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you. It's a source of great joy to talk to you on this very auspicious morning, the 12th of February 2024, the day that is the 200th birth anniversary of one of the greatest sons of the soil, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, best known as the founder of Arya Samaj. The year 1824, the day on which Swami Dayananda arrived in this world, was a period during which India was going through one of its most decadent phases. And as this person who had come prepared, who had been sent to this world with a mission, started growing up, he started observing around him many things that seemed to be completely wrong. He found that religion and spirituality were being observed more in terms of hypocrisy, in terms of rituals and ceremonies, which few understood the significance of. The hymns on special occasions were being chanted in Sanskrit, a language that very few understood. And the whole purpose of it seemed to be either to conform to conventions or, even worse, in some cases, to expect a lot from very little. For example, if somebody wanted a child or somebody wanted to grow rich, wanted his project to be successful, one set of rituals were performed. And if the person had done something wrong and he wanted to be absolved of all his sins, that another set of rituals had to be performed. And people were doing all these blindly without really getting any deeper into the significance of all that they were doing. He felt that all this was wrong, as perhaps many others also did, but he did not stop there. He decided that if I think it is wrong, and I will do something about it. That is what was something rare, and so rare that he deserves the distinction of being one of those who arrived in this world with a mission, saw it clearly, and then executed it. That is the greatness of Swami Dayananda Saraswati, and he was, in that sense, a pioneer because he was the first one after a period of about 700 years to do so. With this little background, let me now turn to the PowerPoint presentation. Sri Aurobindo had some very beautiful things to say about Swami Dayananda, and I'll primarily be talking about Swami Dayananda in the light of what Sri Aurobindo has written about him. So today is the 200th birth anniversary of this great son of the soil, Swami Dayananda Saraswati. And as I said just now, when he arrived in this world, India was passing through one of its most decadent phases. A country which till about 1,000 years ago was second to none in the world had hit a rock bottom. And that was because of our degeneration, which had been further accelerated by slavery, which in turn had, apart from the rest of degeneration, also inculcated in us, induced in us a deep sense of inferiority. Sri Aurobindo describes Swami Dayananda, his unique and distinct role in these words, in these opening words in one of the articles that he wrote about Swami Dayananda. Among the great company of remarkable figures that will appear to the eye of posterity at the head of the Indian Renaissance, at the head, that is, at the very beginning and at the top in terms of their quality. At the head of the Indian Renaissance, the reawakening of India. India that had been asleep for about 700 years by then, once again was woken up to its greatness by many great men, but among them, Swami Dayananda occupies a very distinct place. Among the great company of remarkable figures that will appear to the eye of posterity at the head of the Indian Renaissance, one stands out by himself with peculiar and solitary distinctness. One unique in his type as he is unique in his work. Unique in his type, the type of characteristics he had, the type of qualities he had, the attributes that he had, unique in that sense, and also unique in his work, which means that he was not just a thinker, he was also a doer. One unique in his type as he is unique in his work. It is as if one were to walk for a long time This long time was about 700 years. It is as if one were to walk for a long time amid a range of hills, rising to a greater or lesser altitude, but all with sweeping contours, green clad, flattering in the eye even in their most bold and striking elevation. But amidst them all, one hill stands apart, piled up in sheer strength, a mass of bare and puissant granite, with verdure on its summit, a solitary pine jutting out into the blue, a great cascade of pure, vigorous, and fertilizing water gushing out from its strength as a very fountain of life and health to the valley. So the valley was the rest of the country, and to some extent, one might say, the rest of the world. Such is the impression created on my mind by Dayananda. So Swami Dayananda was one of those rare people who knew at a very young age what he had been sent to do in this world. He chose his materials carefully, properly, and using primarily his intuitive sense. Because we need some material to work on. And one of the beautiful quotes from Sri Aurobindo is that the past is our material, sorry, the past is our foundation, the present is our material, and the future our summit. That is, we need something from the past, which is our foundation, and that the present on which we work is our material. And using that material, we work towards the summit of the future. But then from the past also, one has to find some material to use in the present. And that's what Swami then did. He chose his material properly, and that deserves a lot of credit, as we shall see why. And he determined his conditions, the conditions under which he'll work. He decided those when time came for him to leave home and pursue with a single minded dedication the mission for which he was here. He did it. And then he saw it through. He executed his conception, although he did not live even to be exactly 60. He died a few months short of 60. So, in that relatively short life of just about 60 years, he executed his conception with remarkable vigor. And the result is for all of us to see. His influence, if anything, continued to spread long after he left this world. So, in a way, God had sent him to do a certain work, and he was a very worthy artisan in God's workshop. And if one is doing something which is revolutionary in character, even if it is in the spiritual field, life would be full of battle and work and conquest. And since truth has a power of its own and ultimately emerges victorious, it will also lead to triumphant labor. That is what Swami Dayananda's life was full of: battle and work and conquest and triumphant labor. He was a soldier of light, a solitary soldier without an army to accompany him. Light with a capital L, because he was carrying the light of the divine, the light that reveals the entire truth. He was a warrior in God's world. He was here to fight a battle with a set of people who had forgotten their greatness, who had forgotten their past, and were not able to see God's word in scriptures that this soil itself had come up with 5,000, more than 5,000 years ago. He was a sculptor of men and institutions. He could be inspiring enough to mold men, and molding men in a radical manner is like sculpting them with a chisel. You see, every stone has a statue hidden inside it. But to be able to find that statue, one has to chisel the stone. And that is what he did with many men. But then, even if one does it with 1,000 men, that is not enough. What is important is to build an institution so that the influence would spread, and the influence would continue for a long time. And Swami Dayananda was also a great institution builder, as the growth and development of Arya Samaj shows us. And although he had a lot of opposition to face, he was a bold and rugged victor. Sri Aurobindo sums up the approach of Swami Dayananda in just two simple words: spiritual practicality. That is putting spirituality into practice in everyday life. And that is exactly what Sri Aurobindo's thrust also is, that is bringing spirituality into daily life, giving it a practical shape. And when spirituality is given a practical shape, we call it yoga. So, what Swami Dayananda did was to go to the very root of Indian life and culture and discovered that the root of Indian life and culture, something that had shaped the Indian thought, Indian culture, was the Veda. Sri Aurobindo often uses the word Veda, not the Vedas, because this division or classification into four Vedas came later. Initially, to start with, it was just a body of knowledge. The Veda, Veda itself means knowledge, the ultimate knowledge, the highest knowledge. That's what Veda means. And Sri Aurobindo generally refers to it as just the Veda rather than the Vedas. Although it means this comes to the same thing. Uh, but I'm just trying to explain why frequently I'll be talking about just the Veda, and especially when I'm talking about Sri Aurobindo's quotes. So that is where Swami Dayananda went, because that is what had shaped Indian life and culture. What is culture? Culture, is the way a set of people think, behave, respond to circumstances as a result of their shared past, a long shared past. So here was a set of people who'd, uh, who had shared their past for more than 5,000 years. And the result was that they had certain characteristics. Although the country was going through its decadent phase, still somewhere you could see the undercurrents of that culture. And what was that culture essentially about? It was about the way the spiritual outpourings of the rishis of this land had influenced life. Because this was not the type of spirituality in the Veda which was just about a philosophical sort of uh, discourse or a philosophical uh, musing. It was something which not only gave the highest truth, but also insisted on this truth being applied to everyday life. So that is what had shaped Indian life and culture. And he went to the very root of it, and that was the Veda. And from this flower of this first birth, the roots of this, the Veda would be much older than the Veda itself. But then, as a result of all the developments that had been going on, eventually, from thousands of years of this type of revelations to rishis, and they're trying to formulate into some sort of a words, would have emerged the Veda, which uh, quite obviously has the contribution of a very large number of such seers and sages. So the flower that emerged from all these developments of several thousand years, the flower that emerged at least 5,000 years ago was the Veda. And from this flower, which was the beginning, Swami Dayananda found also the seed for a radical new birth. That is, in the modern world, how the same seed could be used for giving new creation, for new creating the country in light of the present day circumstances. And that required going to the root and then adapting it to today's needs. Even before adapting it, showing that this is still relevant, these things are of perennial value. They may need some adaptation, but the basic truth still is there in the flower of the first birth. And that is what is the appropriate seed for a radical new birth, a renaissance. Renaissance itself means, being born again, dying to one's recent old self and then emerging new. But then this new creation uh, can be naturally, spontaneously, conveniently based on the beginnings. And that's why Swami Dayananda went to the flower of the first birth of the Indian life and culture. And from there, he recovered the seed for a radical new birth, which would wake up the country once again to its greatness and lead to a new birth that is dying to that old 700 years of sleep, waking up from that, and then emerging stronger than the even the beginnings, which were more than 5,000 years ago. So, it's not that we have to go back to the past, but how we can emerge even stronger than before, instead of continuing to be asleep, instead of continuing to believe that we are not capable of doing it, we are vastly inferior than our masters, and at the maximum that we have got from the past is these rituals and ceremonies which we do not understand. Now, that is the type of uh, sleep, that is the type of torpor from which Swami Dayananda was the first one to stimulate the country to wake up. Now, let's see the backdrop. What was the which background in which Swami Dayananda worked? In the 14th century, there was a great scholar, Sayana, who had gone into the Veda in detail and depth and come up with a scholarly commentary. And this continues to be one of the most comprehensive commentaries even today. However, there are two types of people, those who are gist oriented and those who are detail oriented. Sayana was a detail oriented person, and sometimes a detail oriented person misses the essence. For example, suppose you are in a beautiful place and looking at it early in the morning, there's a glorious sunrise that is visible. And then, somebody asked, what do you see there? A detail oriented person might say that, well, I can see a village in which there are so many houses, and and I can see some people, I can see some animals, people are dressed up like this, and from their dress and appearance, they seem to be belonging to such and such place. And then I can see some birds in the sky, and so on and so forth. Now, what this person has done is gone into great detail, and if one might even take it to ridiculous extents, he might even tell you the exact color of the houses and their doors and windows, and the and further he might even start counting the number of birds in the sky. But then what he has missed is the glorious sunrise. So that is the difference between gist oriented and detail oriented. And sometimes summed up in one of the popular sayings that either you can enjoy the sweetness of the fruit, or you can count the number of leaves in the tree which bears the fruit. You can't do both. So, he missed out the gist. And since the details lie in the rituals and ceremonies, he ended up portraying the Veda as a book that provided the basis of the rituals and ceremonies that we perform on special occasions or to get some special benefits like a child or wealth, or to absolve ourselves of our sins. So that is what he ended up highlighting. Then, came Western scholars, amongst whom the best known is Max Muller, who wrote around 1850, again, a commentary on the Veda. And naturally, he consulted Sayana's, no, Sayana or Sayana, that's how it's pronounced, as probably the source of the word Syana or Sayana or Syana. These are words which are in many languages in India, and they all mean wise, the wise one. So I think that came from his name, Sayana. So uh, Max Muller must have consulted his commentary, and one can understand that he would have been overwhelmed by the scholarship and the industry, because there was no lacking of scholarship or the thoroughness or the hard work that he had put into his commentary, and Max Muller must have been adequately impressed by it, and therefore his interpretation was probably based on that. He also saw in it primarily rituals and ceremonies. Added to that was the prejudice of even the most sympathetic uh, observers of the Indian culture in the West. What was the prejudice? The prejudice was that something uh, which goes to the deepest truths of existence and has come up with the right answers which are valid even today could not have happened 5,000 years ago. They were impressed by the antiquity, that at least some primitive people dabbled in these deep existential questions and came up with some plausible answers. But that cannot be the ultimate and the highest truth. How could they have done it so long ago? And they just could not have done it. And because they thought that something could not have been done 5,000 years ago, they came to the conclusion that it was not done 5,000 years ago. Now, that is where we become irrational. Even the most rational people become irrational. If something could not have happened, it did not happen. So, starting with this prejudice, you find that Max Muller, again, uh, not only did not get to the gist, but in fact, because of the added prejudice, he felt that uh, this could not have happened. And like most of the Western commentators, he also highlighted Veda as something which was commendable because of its antiquity. But basically, these were ramblings and dabbling of some primitive barbarians into the worlds of into the world of deep existential questions. So they dabbled in it, but it was not worth much except for its antiquity and historical value. And that's how they looked at it because of the prejudice which was further perhaps reinforced by Sayana's commentary on the Veda. So this was the type of backdrop. And what about the society, the Indian people particularly in general? To some extent, what Sayana had done and Max Muller did was in the air. On top of that, we were suffering from an inferiority complex. What had been done by a Western commentator like Max Muller uh, held great pride of place for us. But at the same time, so the habit of deep scholarship is always rare. It was even rarer during the decadent phase of our culture. And the result was that without actually reading the Veda, without reading even the Sayana's commentary or Max Muller's commentary, people had come to feel that, well, are very old, they are worth a look at. And somehow in the blood, there was great reverence also for these, but same time, they did not care much for this. The Whatever was surviving out of it was left to the priest who could perform the rituals and ceremonies properly. So Veda had by the society by and large been neglected, but same time uh, an uninformed reverence continued. It means the reverence was more because of the tradition and convention, not because of knowing what you are respecting. So the respect was there, but it was based on total ignorance of what the Veda was actually about. Not only total ignorance, in fact, ignorance that was to some extent biased by what Max Muller had done. So Sri Aurobindo has used this beautiful expression to sum up the general attitude of people in general uh, to the Veda. They was the subject of reverential neglect. So it was against this background that came Swami Dayananda. And a little after Max Muller had written his commentary, he came up with his commentary on the Veda, Satyarth Prakash, around 1875. So, in a way, you can say that Dayananda pierced the error of many centuries. That is the neglect that the Veda had suffered and the wrong interpretations that had been given uh, in the 14th century and then by the European commentators in the 18th and 19th century. All those, all that neglect and those errors were pierced by Swami Dayananda because he had the courage to say what he felt. And instead of most of the scholars, other scholars who came, who uh, also were great people and had some sort of originality, they had not been able to do it. Because what most of them had done in their translations and commentaries of ancient Indian literature was that they processed it and they had been influenced deeply by their surroundings. And then they would come up with something apparently original, which either took uh, the same line as the what was prevailing in the atmosphere, a little this way, a little that way, but there was no radical difference. And that is the usual human nature. That's what Sri Aurobindo says, that most of them uh, did play some role, perhaps in at least once again reminding us that we have all this ancient literature, which is worthy of great respect and attention. But they did not really come up with anything which will pierce through all the errors that had crept in through these centuries. That required still greater originality and even more, still greater courage. And that is what Swami Dayananda had. So he has pierced through the error of many centuries. What do you think happened? What was the reaction in general? Thank you, sir, for correcting all these errors. No, no way. That doesn't happen because habits die hard, attitudes die even harder. And the result was that he was criticized. Holes were punched into his interpretations. His method of working was criticized, his way of thinking was criticized, and the products that he came up with, they were criticized. But then he was not affected because, unlike others who went either this way or a little right to this way or a little that way, he had taken a 180-degree turn. It was a revolution. And revolutions are not welcomed by the established order. So even in the intellectual and spiritual circles, there is a certain established order, and that order that had got established over a period of almost 1,000 years could not be challenged so easily. Now, why could Swami Dayananda see in the Veda what others had missed? That happened because he went to the very root of Indian life and culture and derived from it the material for a new birth. So he went to the root, that was the Veda, and derived from it the material for a new birth of this country, a renaissance. And then he had the intuition to perceive its real worth. That is, he could perceive the real value of the Veda and saw in it not just the rituals and ceremonies, but more than that, knowledge with a capital K, that is the highest knowledge accessible to the rishis, the seers, and also how it could be applied, this knowledge could be applied in life through devotion and action. So, in other words, these three basic instruments that we have, the head, the heart, and the hands, they all can be elevated to a higher level, a level which helps us live a meaningful life and actually fulfill the purpose of human life, is based on these three basic instruments and a fusion of the three into whatever we do. A harmony has a unification of these three aspects is at their highest level is what leads to a spiritual life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life. That is the knowledge of the highest, love for the highest, and in using this to do something for the highest, the supreme. So he saw in it all three, and that is what essentially has continued all along. The combination of this knowledge, devotion, and action. That is what the Gita is also about. A sort of a fusion of the Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and the Karma Yoga. Or when one were to fuse it in words, one might say that all of them eventually lead to enlightened action. Action enlightened by knowledge, which is further lubricated by devotion. Because devotion provides, that motivation, that smoothness, that friction-free movement to this action. So, action enlightened by knowledge and lubricated by devotion is what leads to a meaningful life, provided this knowledge, devotion, and action are directed to the highest and the best, the supreme. So he saw all three in the Veda. And although that was not the prevailing atmosphere, he had the courage to differ from what was the prevailing way of looking at these things, looking at the Veda particularly, and to defy it. Swami Dayananda saw in the Veda, as Sri Aurobindo says, material for education. The whole system of education could be built up based on this knowledge, education of the next generation. And all the DAV schools and colleges that we have are evidence of that. He saw in it material for education, material for manhood. That is, man behaving like man behaving like a human being. Because human being is a unique species. To be born as a human being on this earth is a great privilege. And what man can do, no other animal has been able to do. What man aspires for, animals probably do not. And so by responding to that inbuilt aspiration in us, seriously enough and intensely enough, one can achieve manhood. What is that aspiration? The aspiration to evolve in consciousness. So unlike animals, man is not a feeding and breeding creature. Although he does have these functions, feeding and breeding, that continues as in the animals, but man has aspirations much wider, higher, and deeper than that. And that is how man has not only the urge to evolve, but also the capacity to evolve. And that is what fulfills manhood. That is fulfilling God's will to a much greater extent than animals do in this world. That is what manhood is about. And material for that was available in the Veda. And then he saw in it also material for nationhood. That is this inferiority complex that had creeped into us. And we had started looking at our own country as a place which was far inferior to the countries from which our masters came. So, this sense of national pride had to be reawakened, and material for that was also available in the Veda. So, Swami Dayananda was the first one amongst all the great thinkers and great men that we had in that period to actually see in the Veda material for all three: education, manhood, and nationhood. And why could he do it where others had not been able to do it? He was extremely clear headed, a great clarity. Then, he had a great commitment to truth, a great tenacity with which he clung to the truth, irrespective of what was the prevailing atmosphere. No matter what, no matter how he was criticized, no matter what the response of the people was, but he knew that if this is the truth, this is what he will stand up for, even if he has to stand up to the whole world. And then he had the sincerity to not only to cling to the truth, but also to do what he could to let that truth disseminate, spread, and influence the world. And this is not something very common. This combination of qualities is not common, as Sri Aurobindo says, to be clear in one's mind, entirely true and plain with one's self and with others, wholly honest with the conditions and materials of one's labor is a rare gift in our crooked, complex, and faltering humanity. To be clear in one's own mind, to have means a crystal clear mind, a great deal of clarity. And added to that, to be entirely true and plain with one's self and with others. That is, clinging to truth no matter what. Wholly honest with the conditions and materials of one's labor. That is total sincerity. So clarity, truth, and sincerity, the three, qualities which we just saw in the previous one. Clarity, truth, and sincerity. So all these three come in this quote from Sri Aurobindo. To be clear in one's own mind, entirely true and plain with oneself and with others, wholly honest with the conditions and materials of one's labor is a rare gift. Even one of them is rare, combination is still rare. Is a rare gift in our crooked, complex, and faltering humanity. This was Sri Aurobindo writing uh, more than 100 years ago. But then, sometimes you feel that only the world today is like that. But he could see this character of humanity in general being crooked, complex, and faltering even at that time, because basic human nature has not really changed over these 100 years and perhaps not for thousands of years. But that again was the vision of Sri Aurobindo. Just because basic human nature has not changed for thousands of years does not mean that it will always be so. It is poised for a big leap and a radical change in human nature for the better in the very near future. But then it's people like Swami Dayananda who brought in that rare combination, which was completely out of the ordinary, the combination of clarity, truth, and sincerity. And if one has that combination, how does nature respond? Nature recognizes a clear, honest, and recognizable knock at her doors. So, a person, this combination is as if knocking at the doors of nature, and what is the result? And gives the result with an answering scrupulosity and diligence, which means that the person receives these gifts from nature. The person gives an expression to these qualities, and then the nature responds by gifting him with being scrupulous. That is, no compromises, very careful in sticking to the truth. So he acquires that quality, he becomes scrupulous, and diligence, which means he has he becomes hardworking, he becomes persistent. He has perseverance, hard work, the capacity to work hard and perseverance, and staying scrupulous. These are the gifts that the qualities, the attributes that nature confers on him in response to his knock at the door of nature with total sincerity, clinging to the truth, and total honesty, and with a clear headed approach. So that is what made Swami Dayananda capable of doing what he did. Now, coming to the fundamentals of the deeper truths of existence, there are always three fundamental entities which we have to admit and whose relations we have to know if we would understand existence at all: God, nature, and the soul. God, the creator; nature, the executing power of God, and the form that that executing power has given to the world, to the universe, actually, of which this world is a part, and the soul, that is the individual, that is the divine essence of the individual. So, nature manifesting itself as an individual with a divine essence, which is the soul. So, basically, the creator, the creation at large, and each individual, which is a part of that nature. So, in each individual, a small little drop in that ocean of the entire creation. So, these three are important. These three are fundamental uh, if we have to understand existence at all. Because all that exists is in a way God, and what is not God does not exist. But then God has manifested itself, and that manifestation is nature. So we cannot understand God truly unless we understand how it has manifested through nature. And then, as human beings, we are also concerned with the individual. What is the purpose of life of the individual in this world? What his relations to nature and God should be? So that is what Swami Dayananda could see in the Veda. All these three fundamental entities: God, nature, and soul. And if we see nature as a manifestation of God or the divine, we can discover a law of nature. That is, what is the type of relationship the divine has with its manifestation? What are the laws that govern nature? What are the laws through which the uh, permanence, the relative permanence and continuation of nature has been ensured? Because what has been manifested is temporary, but all the same, it has a certain persistence and it has a certain recurrence which seems to be infinite. And that is possible because the manifestation follows certain laws which may be called the laws of nature. And then within that, the individual soul, particularly the human soul, uh, that gives us the law of life. That is, how is it that the human being should live as a part of this nature so as to uh, respect the law of nature, and through that, within that, discover the relationship which this individual should have with other individuals, that the rest of the creation, and the relationship which this individual should have with the creator, the divine. So he could see in it not only the creator, but also the law of nature, of which the law of individual life becomes a part and makes life meaningful. Or sometimes, we call it in as the Jiva Jagat and Jagadish. Jagadish is the divine, that is the Lord of the universe, and Jagat is the nature, that is the manifestation, and the Jiva is the individual soul. So the relationship of the Jiva Jagat and Jagadish, that is what essentially uh, the fundamental truths of life are about. Then, Sri Aurobindo makes this penetrating observation that modern thought, influenced deeply by the rationalistic age in the, of Europe, which started around the 16th century and was more or less at its peak in the 19th century and 20th century when Swami Dayananda and Sri Aurobindo were around. So modern thought, affirming nature and law, but denying God, denied also the possibility of revelation. But so also has it denied many things which a more modern thought is busy reaffirming. So that is where the fundamental flaw of uh, rationality, great though it is, and it has given us modern science and technology, uh, great that greatness apart, that contribution apart, what it's based on is acknowledging nature, although it's not seen as a manifestation of the divine, but nature itself. And soul, naturally, if you do not believe in the divine, you do not believe in the soul, although you may believe in the individual. And if there's an individual, then you also uh, expect that the individuals will live by a certain law of life, and that law of life, uh, in terms of rationality, was what was given by the Western thinkers in the form of rationalistic humanism. So, nature and law, modern thought has affirmed, but denied God. And if you deny that, you deny also the possibility of revelation, that is, discovering truth through a channel other than the intellect. That is, there can be sources of knowledge, the highest knowledge, which go beyond sensory perception, which go beyond intellectual excursions. So that also has been denied. So denies also revelation. But then Sri Aurobindo takes a rather casual view of it. Nothing to worry, because you can deny it for a while, but then even modern thought itself is now busy reaffirming some of the ancient, so-called ancient but not obsolete ideas, like this combination of God, nature, and law. So within that, some of the things which it had denied, it's busy reaffirming, because you cannot keep truth down for very long. But then pioneers have these difficulties uh, in the era when modern thought was dominating the world because of the uh, prosperity and the colonization which the West had been able to achieve, that dominated the world. So, in that sort of a world which had accepted only nature and law but denied God, uh, to have a person like Swami Dayananda and asserting that all three exist in the Veda was not easy. But then that is what uh, makes these great people truly great. We cannot demand of a great mind that it shall make itself a slave to vulgarly received opinion or the transient dogmas of the hour. That is not what a great mind does. It is not a slave to vulgarly received opinion. Why vulgarly received? That is based on a prejudice that these primitive people couldn't have done it. So, and that shapes the opinion. Or the transient dogmas of the hour. That is, well, nature and law we can accept, but where is God? If I don't see God, God doesn't exist. Forgetting that what we see, what we perceive with our senses, does not exhaust all the possibilities of truth. But then a great mind is not a slave to vulgarly received opinion or the transient dogmas of the hour. The very essence of greatness is this, that it looks beyond and it sees deeper. See this remarkable choice of words. Looks is not the same as sees. He looks beyond, his vision is futuristic, and he sees deeper, that is able to see what others can't see because he can delve deep using tools which are higher than reason, higher than the intellect, higher than the mind. They do not depend upon sensory perception. So, using that tool through which the seer has seer, that's why it's called a seer, because he can see. The seer has access to uh, levels of truth, planes of truth, which are inaccessible to the ordinary senses. It requires a divine eye, as Sri Krishna says in the Gita. He gives Arjun the Divya Chakshu, the divine eyes, to be able to see what is not normally seen with the ordinary eyes. So, a great mind is associated with looking beyond and seeing deeper. Not only Swami Dayananda saw in the Veda in the combination of God, nature, and the soul, and how that gave the law of nature and the law of life, what Swami Dayananda also saw in the Veda were the truths of modern science in Vedic hymns. Now, this was even more controversial than the rest. How could the ancients have discovered science which was taught by the West, and that is that what was fed to us, fed to the rest of the world, which is just about modern science, which is just about 400 years old. And then, if it had any foundations, the foundations were in the Greek civilization of about 300 to 400 BC. That is where the roots were. Then came the Dark Ages of Europe, and then Renaissance from 16th century onwards is what had created modern science. How could it have been discovered so long ago? Did they have this sort of instruments? Did they have this sort of equipment? Now, what was forgotten was that even scientific truths can be revealed. The present way of discovering scientific truths is not the only way to discover them. Their scientific truths are a part of a larger truth, and some of these scientific truths can also be discovered by a channel which is not the same as the channel of intellect. It so that is they can also be revealed part of revealed knowledge. Uh, so when Swami Dayananda saw that many truths of modern science were already inherent, were already there in the Vedic hymns, naturally that for that he received even more criticism. Now, on that also, Sri Aurobindo has a few beautiful things to say, and this is one of them. And he says that the ancient civilizations did possess secrets of science, some of which modern knowledge has recovered, extended, and made more rich and precise, but others are even now not recovered. So, ancient civilizations, like the Indian civilization, had in their scriptures, like the Veda, the secrets of science, some of which modern knowledge has recovered, which means rediscovered. They had been forgotten for some time, and therefore it seemed that knowledge did not exist. But through a different type of method, different type of approach, the rational approach and the approach of experimentation, modern science had recovered some of those secrets, extended them, added further detail to them, made more rich, that is, made them still more elaborate and precise, improved upon the accuracy. So Sri Aurobindo is giving all the credit to modern science, what it has done to the secrets of science available in this ancient literature. Modern science has recovered, extended, and made more rich and precise, but others are even now not recovered. There are still some scientific truths in the scriptures like the Veda, which are which have still not been recovered or rediscovered by modern science. And then he goes on to say that therefore there is nothing fantastic in Dayananda's idea that Veda contains truth of science as well as truth of religion. So this is not something as uh, strange or fantastic as it looks. And what Sri Aurobindo said in this one, that others are even now not recovered, is something which is coming true more and more. Uh, and in fact, it was these further discoveries which that led to a convergence of science and spirituality. And the first ones to point in that direction were the physicists, and the best known of whom is Fritjof Capra, the Tao of Physics, the author of the Tao of Physics. He discovered that in many of the findings of modern theoretical physics, a level of physics that I don't understand, but then there have been several physicists, including Fritjof Capra and Mani Bhaumik and Gary Zukav and so on, who have pointed out that many of the findings of modern theoretical physics are consistent with the spiritual worldview. And that is what led to that convergence. So more and more uh, could be recovered, and that is what Sri Aurobindo is pointing at. That in fact, and as in the previous quote also, that after rejecting some of these ideas, ancient ideas, modern thought is once again busy reaffirming them. And this reaffirmation has come partly because of the convergence of science and spirituality through the findings in theoretical physics. But then, of course, it didn't stop there. After the physicists uh, entered into the picture, physiologists, and then the clinicians who started applying this ancient wisdom and found that it had a validity even in prevention and treatment of disease. So there's nothing fantastic in Dayananda's idea that Veda contains truth of science as well as truth of religion. And then Sri Aurobindo says that I will even add my own conviction that Veda contains other truths of science the modern world does not at all possess. That is, there are truths of science which the modern world does not have, but maybe in future modern science will rediscover those through its methods, that is, the scientific methods. And in that case, Dayananda has rather understated than overstated the depth and range of Vedic wisdom. So Swami Dayananda has not uh, exceeded his brief. He has not overstated the presence of scientific truths. He has, in fact, understated, because all he has said is that some of the things which are there in modern science are there, but some of the things which are not there in modern science, which modern science is discovering one by one, that is also there. That he has not claimed, and therefore, in that sense, he has understated rather than overstated the depth and range of Vedic wisdom. And here is a tribute to Swami Dayananda. In the matter of Vedic interpretation, I am convinced that whatever may be the final complete interpretation, Dayananda will be honored as the first discoverer of the right clues. In spite of some distractions which are available in Sayana's commentary and the commentary of Western commentators like Max Muller, in spite of that, he was a pioneer in discovering the right clues in Vedic wisdom. So, in the matter of Vedic interpretation, I'm convinced that whatever may be the final complete interpretation, Dayananda will be honored as the first discoverer of the right clues. I could end this perhaps with a prayer which Sri Aurobindo has written, said for Swami Dayananda. May his spirit, that is Swami Dayananda's spirit, may his spirit act in India pure, unspoilt, unmodified. That is unadulterated, not contaminated by prejudice, not contaminated by the usual impurities of ordinary mortals. May his spirit act in India pure, unspoilt, unmodified, and help to give us back that of which our life stands specially in need: pure energy, vigor and strength and dynamism, high clearness, clear-headedness, the penetrating eye, the eye that can see through things by supplementing the ordinary eye with the divine eyes, the penetrating eye, the masterful hand, the hand which is empowered by the power of the divine, the noble and dominant sincerity. And all that can happen only if we are sincere about what we believe in. So may his spirit act in India pure, unspoiled, unmodified, and help to give us back that of which our lives stand specially in need. It stood in need 100 years ago. We continue to have those needs, and there is always room for having more and more of these pure energy, high clearness, the penetrating eye, the masterful hand, the noble and dominant sincerity. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write to us on yes@yesspirituality.com. And here's acknowledgement for some of the material used in this. Of course, apart from Sri Aurobindo's articles on Swami Dayananda in this booklet, Bankim Tilak Dayananda, the picture which you saw, Swami Dayananda's picture repeatedly, that's from Google search, discovered through Google search, and the original source is English Jagaran. And Sri Aurobindo's drawing, writing, uh, that has been drawn by Subhash Chandra, and the hilly landscape drawing by Vasudhara Roy Munshi. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making the session possible, and thank you all for being there. So, with the gratitude to Swami Dayananda, and with the prayer for his influence to continue, so that the what we need continues to materialize more and more. There's always room for more and more of that energy, that dynamism, that clarity and sincerity which Sri Aurobindo has prayed for. Uh, may that continue to multiply and help this country rise, become stronger, get better. And as Sri Aurobindo has said, when India rises, it is not for itself, it is for the world. So, India rising and using the type of material, the type of beginnings that Swami Dayananda provided, this country will, we hope, will continue to rise and will continue to create a better world. Thank you all.